Thank you so much for coming. On behalf of the Behner Stiefel Center for Brazilian Studies, welcome to today's event, Reparations Between the US and Brazil, a dialogue with Diva Moreira. Before we begin, it's important to remember that this event is taking place on unceded Kumeyaay lands and to acknowledge our ongoing implication in settler communities. Today's event would not have been possible without efforts and collaboration across campus and across San Diego, and really all the way to Brazil. First, I want to thank our colleagues at the UCSD Black Studies Project, especially Dr. Juliana Boyes, who reached out to make this collaboration happen. Here at SDSU, I want to thank our colleagues in Africana Studies, especially Dr. Daniela Gomez and Dr. Adviza Alkubulan, who is generously hosting this event during his class, Africana Studies 380, Blacks in the American Justice System. Thank you so much to the students of AFRAS 380 for hosting us. And I also want to thank Dr. Gloria Rhodes, who secured us the space in the Love Library to host the event. And finally, I'd like to thank my incredible team at the Center for Brazilian Studies, Flavia Soares, Huey Younger, Victoria Argimon, Trinity Magdalena Weary, and Abner Sotanos. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Goins.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today. The list of thanks is big, so I'm not going to give thanks for everybody, but I just want to highlight particularly thank you, Dr. Kari, for hosting here, and for the Center of Brazilian Studies for receiving us. And I would like to introduce you, our dear Diva Moreira. I had to take her mini bio is so big that I had to take something to remember everything. But it's an honor to be here with you today, and I would like to introduce you for everyone. Diva is one of the griots. For those who doesn't know, griot is a word that used in the Brazilian Black movement. I'm also now, and Daniel, we're three people, Black people from Brazil. To refer, it's an African word, but we use it in the social movement to refer to those who open path for the young ones to be here. And Diva is definitely one of these people. We lived 30 years of a hard dictatorship, military dictatorship from 64 and 85. And Diva was one of those who organized the resistance at that time with the Communist Party, had her house invaded by the militaries, was prohibited to speak publicly for a long time, but she continued the fight so we could have not only open government, but that we could survive and be here today in this event. So beyond that, I'm not gonna go over everything because it's really big, but I live particularly in a place called Belo Horizonte, where Diva lives nowadays. And in Minas Gerais, in the state where the city was, we had in the 60s, we can call a concentration camp because that was what really was, but officially was a psychiatric hospital in which especially Black people were forced into it. And they lived locked and they died their whole lives there. There was estimated that 60,000 Black people were killed in that hospital at that time. And Diva Moreira was one of the first ones to come publicly against what was happening and call for reform in mental health systems in Brazil. So yeah, thank you again for all doing that. And beyond that, she did many other things. She had collaborated in many other projects for women's movements, Black movements, and currently she's organizing, making a grassroots movement called part of the Comitê for Reparations in Minas Gerais. There is an alliance between several movements in Brazil to talk about reparations and to move forward an agenda on reparations. So Diva, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you so much for this trouble that you bring to us in your life. Thank you.
I don't like to speak sit. My English is not very good, but I'm sure you can understand me. And this is the reason why I made this presentation in English, in order to be easier for me. talk to you this afternoon at the State University of San Diego. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. And I'm very thankful to Crystal and Flavia at the Brazilian Studies, Juliana, Sarah, Angela, Becker, from the Black Studies Project, UC San Diego, Danny Gomez Department of Africana Studies. Okay, Africana Studies, so many people came here to join this conversation, which is really, really important. If you want not just to build racial justice, but mainly to build a different planet, a different world. We need to save the world, to save our communities, to save, I wouldn't say to save a civilization, because I think that both of us, from Brazil and even in this country, we didn't be able to create a civilization. We weren't able to create humanity's full citizenship in our countries, integrality in the justice system in our countries. This is the reason I think that reparations is not only about Blacks, but about the kind of society and of the state we dream to create for all of us. So maybe you will. Okay, let's say you saw this program, and I'm here on behalf of this lion in order to talk about our history. Okay. The purpose of my work, it's not only to contextualize the need for historical reparations, but to offer propositional reflection on a new project, a new nation project. I told you about integrality of law and democracy, according to one of working in the promotion of justice for all people without exception. And I also put this book, my objective, my purposes into this broader framework of neoliberal capitalism, and also all of that you know quite well. The point of okay. The narrative which I'm building, I'm constructing, unfolds in two phases. The first, to undo the lies about slavery in Brazil. Our historian, many of them, our books for children in primary schools, even from high schools, they transmit an idea of a benign enslavement in Brazil, the low productivity, low qualifications of an enslaved workforce. The second moment is dedicated to the Republican Nation project, founded on structural, institutional, and individual basis. Why this revision of history is necessary? Because historian, as all those great and respected dictators maintained the hegemony of knowledge and discourse on what they call the history of Brazil and slavery, making it a great adversary of the Black people. If you don't know our history, if we think that enslaved people were unable, were passive, were ignorant, and so on and so forth, how can we build self-esteem, our children's self-esteem and self-pride of being Black? It's really impossible. So, they through the struggles and resistance against the slavery into the field of civility, often conveying the image of the stupidity and the stupidity of Black men and women. They forged the lie of slavery, different from what happened in the United States because of legal segregation and racial democracy in Brazil. Another lie was the image of the bad worker associated with Black people and that of good worker associated with white people of European origin who came in large ways, especially in the first decades of the 20th century. That modernity in countries' progress would be impossible with the poor quality of the Brazilian population. It means including even white Portuguese people. Look, Brazil, this large amount of years, this long history of Brazil over 5 centuries, this 38 were spent under slavery and 135 under persistent and systematic racism. How to calculate repairs, how to create a methodology for calculating that. I'm building those parameters to be used even during, I'm not sure, you know that Brazil, before the abolition of enslavement, Brazil was an empire. From 1822 until 1889, Brazil was an empire. Just after the abolition of enslavement, the empire fell down. I will show in my book the reason of that political turmoil.
Political change? Don't worry.
Because it was very stupid. Oh, yes. So I'm putting all of those in social and historical indicators beginning and the extinction of slavery. Because some states, some northern states have had abolished the enslavement before this world Brazil wider law signed by the Princess Elizabeth. The beginning and extinction importance of the slave economy. For giving you an idea, Brazil in the 19th century has the 10th largest economy in the world. Based on what? Based on enslaved work, based on Black workforce. Type of the contingent of enslaved people, this changed a lot. For instance, I come from a state which had the largest enslaved population when the abolition came. Hardness of regime, I'm sure we can measure all of that We don't have how to put everything precisely because it's a historical, we don't have the documents to prove, oh, X number of enslaved people, what have been killed in this state or in this other state. But we will do our best to dimension the cruelty of enslavement per states of the Federation and before the state of the monarchy state, not state, but during the monarchy. Hardness of the regime, emancipation fund, we have this large amount of money in this emancipation fund in order to have our bills on freedom bills to stay here. And this money just disappears. And this money, many of our people worked a lot to put the money into this emancipation fund. And we don't know how this ended up. Favors granted to immigrants during province of the empire and state of the federation. Missing Black men and women. This is the total value of reparations for rights. Okay. Calculations, again, the calculations of reparations. I'm separating all those kinds of victims between our people who were missed. Missing. Oh, I don't know if you have heard about Paraguayan War. This war was awful. They just destroyed the Paraguay. Most of male Paraguayans, even children, have been killed at that time. A war which gathered 3 southern states in the South America: Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. They just destroyed Paraguay. And most of people who went to fight against Paraguay were Blacks, and they were put in a position of being more killed, being more in very risky positions during that war. And we have many armed conflicts over the land since the beginning of the Republic. I mean, dealing with all those struggles, all those revolts against, in order to protect our communities, what we call in Brazil, quilombos. And maybe you are more familiar with Palenques and Maroon societies. I don't know, but we call them Black communities, which were interracial, completely interracial. We don't have any experience at all of discrimination against whites or against indigenous. All of those communities, I'm Italian, and I'm telling you, we're interracial. Numbers of victims of famine drought since 1887. Look at the figures. Drought of in 1915, we had concentration camps in Ceará, Brazil. Can you believe that? And this is not a name. This is not me who are named concentration camps. This is an official name. But as soon as in newspapers came up the information about the Nazi concentration camps, they decided to change the names. And all of those concentration camps, it's completely unbelievable to think that our people enslavement. So few years later would be put in those concentration camps. But I'll show you worse figures. None of those martyred in Slavery. I always say in Brazil that we don't heroes there at all. We just have martyrs. Martyrs? Martyrs.
Martyrs, yes.
None of the fishing men, most of them were blacks. Construction victims, most of them were blacks. So these are the relationship, not drinking, but the relation of the missing people in Brazil. Okay. Oh, Juliana told you about my struggle against hospices, which was really, really powerful. Excluded population in those disciplinary institutions. For the large economies, all of a sudden, our children that had our children, even during enslavement, they had functions, they had what to do, they had tasks. But after the abolition of enslavement, all of a sudden they became orphans, and they were put in those institutions of control and repression. Number of children. So it's quite interesting when we see what happened in the West and what happened in Brazil. We didn't have in our schools, we didn't have a sign, blacks forbidden. Blacks forbidden, we didn't have that. It's so, oh my goodness. But here you have blacks forbidden, no blacks at all. But in Brazil, we had a very elegant way of excluding blacks from the rights in schools. It was just a question of saying that barefoot children can't attend this school. No school uniform can't attend this school. It's more elegant. we should say, most of the time I think, oh my goodness, our elites were much more intelligent than the white elite in the US and in South Africa during apartheid and so on. Number of children on the streets, victims of massacres, and those situations happen even during the Brazilian 1988 Constitution. This is the reason why I say most of the time that we don't live in a democracy in Brazil, because even after the military dictatorship, even when we had this so wonderful constitution, I struggled for this constitution. I was so happy. Oh my goodness, now we have a constitution. We had many massacres, many children and Black people massacres after that. This is the reason why I think I stay on and always stressing that we don't have a democracy in the country. So in all of those institutions, also these disciplinary institutions, hospices, in prison. Look, this very large prison in Rio de Janeiro was created 6 years after abolition. Can you believe that? It's really awful. And we have, in Minas Gerais, We have also a huge correctional colony, but this so-called enemies of honest work. Okay. Those women you are seeing in this image, it's not a getty image. It's image that I saw. I went there, I talked with these women. They were considered crazy, mental,
Mentally.
yes, mentally ill, mentally ill, and so on. They were not. They were just blacks. After immediately, so few years after the abolition of slavery. But we had a very winning strategy in Brazil, the immigrants. And it's really necessary to understand that the difference between immigrants in the US and immigrants in Brazil. Because people who came from different countries to the US, those were voluntary immigrations, in the US. And in Brazil, we didn't have that. It was financed, sponsored immigration, both by the state or by the some particular institutions. And the immigrants went to Brazil in order to whitening, to cleanse our Black population. It was in 87. And it's completely documented. I'm not inventing anything. I'm just based on data. Okay. And I put even those experience they said at that time, at that time they say that, oh, they would bring to Brazil very qualified workers. Look where they qualified the workers. Former soldiers, former prisoners, violence, it's not my words. It's
Nicolau Vergueiro.
yes, these people from cripples, blind, and idiots. These people from many administrations, all the facilities to immigrate. European countries decided to facilitate the immigration of those people in order to get to also urbanize, to also create conditions of good urbanization in their cities. So they didn't look, so that individuals in good health found themselves obliged to support golden percent. Okay. This colony was in my state, Minas Gerais. This same happened at that time. The Potsdam police took advantage of the opportunity to purify the population of that city, discarding 100 costly and suspicious individuals. So among them, one appeared to be arrested months later for kindness he did in the province of the Espírito Santo. He declared during an interrogation that he had come to Brazil at the invitation of Pakistan police after having been sentenced there for a few years in the galleys as a forger of Berlin bank notes. Can you believe that? This is the white population brought to Brazil in order to replace blacks. Meanwhile, We have the kind state for immigrants. So I will read that for you. If you need to take some notes, you can do it easily because I can say, I can delay a lot to make this presentation because I really would like to have your comments, to have your questions, to interact with you. So look, so many benefits for those immigrants who came to Brazil. In São Paulo, okay. In Minas Gerais, the same happened. Look at these large amount of the special credits to intend to favor immigration. And for us, it was very complicated at that time. Because as you can see, we lost, it's incredible to say, but we lost a lot in this transition from enslavement to the abolition to republic. Because during 300 years, we were the labor force. We are very required for everything. Although all horrible cruelties, tortures, and so on and so forth. But we have a position in the Brazilian nation. We were the labor force. And look, I'm speaking about a demographic, a demographic shock, because from the period of 1884 to 19, almost the same number of people, of Blacks, who have been enslaved throughout 3 centuries. And in those 49 years, we received mostly the same amount, the same amount of immigrant population than have been enslaved throughout over 3 centuries. So it was very. It's difficult. It's not difficult, but it's still difficult to overcome, to recover from this situation because nothing had been done in order to overcome structural racism in Brazil. Unfortunately, nothing has been done. Just some small
Crabs.
Yes, crabs. The second foundation of my book, in order to make people understand that reparations should be the way to overcome our situation of racism in Brazil. The social consequence of this nation project. Because if you go to Brazil, most of people looking at those on the streets, of those underpaid workers, those who are in prisons, those who live in slums, and so on and so forth. And they don't know the history, our history. They will realize that there is something wrong with us. Isn't it? They will say that, oh, maybe Black people, okay, maybe Black people have an inferior genes. Because throughout our history, mainly after the abolition of enslavement, we didn't experiment upward mobility. Okay. I just have 3 minutes. Okay, so maybe I should go to the end, saying that we all of those consequences we haven't revealed until to this point, until today. All those, what can I say, all those problems, all those social, economic problems. I would end saying to you that we don't have any other opportunity to create another history with you. Otherwise, we deal with the question of reparation. If you don't put reparations as a priority in my country, what will happen to us? Look, this study, OECD study, called the Broken Social Elevators. Fortunately, they included Brazil. It's not a Black movement study. It's not. Only in what the study said, only 9 generations will those with below average income reach in this income level at 2018, when the results was public, will reach the same average income only in 9 generations ahead. Okay. Okay. Can you believe that? I realized that from my grandfather, who was enslaved in the north of Minas Gerais, up to the kids in my family. It took 8 generations. So, plus 9 generations. Is it fair to say that, oh, it's just a question? How can I talk to people, young people in Brazil, high school children, teens, Black women who are suffering because of their children in prison? How can I talk to them and say, oh, just a minute? You should wait 9 generations. Everything will be fine after 9 generations. This means from the abolition of enslavement until this 9 generations, it would be necessary for us to pass through 18 generations to reach this level of income. It's not a question of being a member of the Supreme Court. It's not a question of being the president of Brazil, a very important ministry of education, of health, and so on. It's a question of having the same income level. It's impossible, it's not fair, definitely. We can't just to sit down and to wait. And this is the reason why I'm strategizing this broad argument, narrative toward reparations. It's not definitely, we cannot definitely wait for so huge waiting changes in a very rigid social and race hierarchy we have in Brazil. So I have more to say, but I don't have time anymore. I really would like to know, how do you think of that questions? I turn to you, and those those who are African Americans and who are dealing with the reparations in this country. I'd like also to hear from you and to have, probably we have comparisons to be made between our situation and yours. Thank you so very much.
Diva, it was a pleasure having you here with us. We are going to open up for questions, but before that, I want to thank you, Ms. Camila Moore from the Task Force for Reparations in California. So please help me welcome her. So I will try to wrap up a little bit before I open up for questions. For those who are not familiar with the situation of Brazil and how Brazil works, Brazil was the last country in the world to emancipate slavery. So it started almost 100 years before the US, is still in the 16th century, in 1500s, and ended in 1888. No other country lasts as much as Brazil, 300 years of slavery. That means that our democracy, quote unquote, for Black people is less than 150 years. That Black people in Brazil, like myself, Ms. Diva, and many others, are considered citizens of that country. The other thing that it's important to mention that Ms. Diva brought it is that the Black population in Brazil, self-declared Black population of Brazil, represents 56% of the population. So in numbers, we are not a minority over there. We are actually a majority. 56 self-declaring. That goes from light-skinned Black people like myself to very dark-skinned Black people. So we are not talking about a population that's not meaningful. We eat, we buy, we are very, we impact our commerce, our economy. But when it's time to treat us as citizens, the state doesn't see us. The state only sees us when it's time to impose violence. In Brazil, here in this country, in the US, where African Americans only, right, are 13, 14% of the population, we have one Black person assassinate each 24 hours. Camila, thank you. In Brazil, one Black person dies each 23 minutes.
Yes, 23.
Each 23 minutes, a Black person is assassinated in Brazil. Most of them youth from 12 to 24 years old, and by the hands of the state. If you turn your TV and you see the conflict that's happening right now in Israel and the Palestine, which is awful, that type of conflict happened every single day in a favela community in Brazil. Only the state of Rio de Janeiro, we have that kind of violent armed conflict from the state to the population every week, including children being murdered, including civilians being murdered. And one of the reasons for that is the police in Brazil is still a military police. And that's one of our struggle for the end of the militarization of the police in Brazil, because the military, you know what the military works for. The military is to defend borders, not to host civilians, right? So if the police is trained as the military, you can imagine the violent impact on how they treat people. The other thing is, when you talk about civil rights in the US, we are talking about 60, more or less 50, 60 years now, right? My students know, I have been telling, and all the professors who are coming here share that, how the history of civil rights in the US is really recent. It was yesterday. We have professors right here at SDSU who went to segregated schools. But as Ms. Diva told you, we don't need paper saying whites only in Brazil, because those policies are very effective. Until 1988, the year of our constitution in Brazil, illiterate people could not vote. Who are the majority of illiterate people in Brazil by then? Just a guess. Black people. So even by law, we were not forbidden from vote just for being Black. Our grandparents or Miss Diva parents would not be allowed to vote if they didn't know how to write or read. So those are things that are important to mention. Why? Because the idea that Brazil sells abroad about our countries, the idea of a white Latino country, a topic that we don't even talk in our own country, because like we all Latinos, so right? And race ethnicity, two different things. So we sell the image of a country that is harmonious racially, and that's far from true. So the pleasure that you guys have here to listen to this griot, and for those who understand and who are Africana studies students, you know what a griot is. It's a storyteller in African communities who would hold the community in a circle and share history. So you just experience that with life history. So again, help me welcome Ms. Diva Moreira. And if you have a question, please put your hands and I will be more than happy to translate for her. Thank you. Any questions, guys? Yes, come on.
Thank you so much, Ms. Diva, for this presentation. I just have two comments and then a question. I just want to elucidate the comparisons as I was listening to your excellent testimony. One of the comparisons with African Americans who descend from slaves, it'll take 228 years for the racial wealth gap to close at a national level between Black Americans and White Americans. Now, I'm not sure how many generations that is, but as you said, it'll take 9 generations for Black Brazilians to have the average income of white Brazilians. So think that that's around the same amount of time. 9 generations might be a little bit longer. I'm also glad that Professor Juliana also talked about how police brutality is much more intensified in Brazil. We think police brutality is horrible here, which it is. Thank you for highlighting how intensified it is in Brazil. The other point or comparison that I thought was interesting when you talked about the immigrantism and how, whereas in America there was voluntary immigration, and in Brazil there was, the government, deliberately took, I guess, Europeans and Japanese and brought them over here to subvert the Black labor class. And, even though in America that immigration was voluntary, the comparison that I want to highlight, and this is something the late Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said many times right before he was assassinated, when he talked about the California and the Federal Homestead Act. Those are two examples of public policy in this country that excluded African Americans, gave away hundreds and hundreds of millions of acres of land. Martin Luther King said, so this was the quote from Martin Luther King. He was saying while Congress refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress was giving away hundreds of acres of millions of land, which to white Americans, which meant the United States was willing to undergird its newly arriving European peasant class with an economic floor while denying that opportunity to African Americans. And so the California Reparations Task Force, we discovered, for instance, 46 million people living today, white Americans, are present day beneficiaries of the federal and California Homestead Act. So that's a quarter, 25% of the white adult population are still beneficiaries of that exclusionary public policy. So either they still have that land on them with them, or they sold it and it's now part of their generational wealth. So I just wanted to highlight those two comparison similarities between Black Americans and Black Brazilians as it relates to legal subjugation of our groups post-slavery. So I guess my question to you is, I know in Brazil there are racial quotas, which, as we know, race-based preferences or race-conscious preferences, particularly in education, employment, and contracting in California is illegal, and now it's illegal nationwide for education. So we don't have racial quotas in the United States. We never have. But my question to you is, what do you say to conservative Brazilians who might say to you that you all have reparations because you have racial quotas?
Just a second that I'm gonna help with the translation and then come back. Basicamente, ela apontou 2 pontos de comparação, que aqui também há estudos que a Task Force fez, que demoraria mais de 200 anos para que os americanos negros 230 tivessem o mesmo ponto. Que eles também descobriram que aqui também teve política de dar muitas terras para pessoas brancas, imigrantes brancos, europeus. E também teve isso em partes dos Estados Unidos. E aí ela faz as comparações e ela faz uma pergunta. Aqui a gente teve um momento nos Estados Unidos onde se foi proibido ações afirmativas e as cotas raciais e políticas com base. E ela sabe que isso existe no Brasil. Ela pergunta, o que você diria para os brasileiros conservadores que dizem que nós temos separações porque nós temos ações afirmativas?
Guys, let's do more two questions so she can answer the first round, and then if we have more questions, we can open up again. Any other questions? Anyone has a question for Ms. Diva, please? Okay, they are shy.
Shy.
Yes, so,
One question.
okay.
So a lot of the counter opinion, right, about reparations in the US is who does the accounting, right? Because that's obviously a difficult thing to do. So how would you propose, or what is in the discourse regarding the accounting for reparations? How it goes out and who it goes to?
Quem faz as contas e quem vai
Quem recebe.
Quem paga.
Quem
Tá,
recebe.
Any other questions, guys, before she answers? Yeah, okay.
I think on what basis should Afro-Brazilians receive reparations?
Sorry,
What basis should Afro-Brazilians?
what do you mean by what basis? Just
What?
try to process to
Excuse me, what's your name, please?
Angel,
Angel.
like in general, like,
What kind of reparations?
yeah, what kind of reparations?
Que tipo de reparações seriam baseadas, né? O pedido de reparação para afro-brasileiros.
Okay.
Deixa eu ligar seu microfone. Você quer
Reparations should.
rapidinho, você quer falar em português, a gente traduz?
Acho que eu posso falar inglês, mas parece. I'm trying to do my best in speaking English. Look, Camila raised the question of quotas which are forbidden in the US, and we have in Brazil. It was a very difficult question, policy to be accepted in Brazil, mainly by the academia, unfortunately. And some authors wrote books about Black situation there, but when it was the case of having them in the universities, like São Paulo University was one of the last to accept these quotas. I don't like this word. I know that quotas is started in the US in order to exclude the two people from the mainstream society. But we are not the ones who invented the word race. Race, they invented the science of races invented that, and we use that in order to have a common identity among all of us who come from African descent. As Danny told you, from light skin up to very melanin, I say that race, pure race in Brazil, those who have strong melanin in their skin. All of us are Blacks. And we had the Supreme Court with us. Fortunately, we have many people, many outstanding Black lawyers who stood for that and who went to the Supreme Court in order to make our justice to understand the question, the need of affirmative action policies. And we still have many people who are conservatives who don't want that anymore. And for me, this issue of affirmative action is just a part of a very large reparation strategies. Because if you have in Brazil very good quality education policies from now to 20 years from now, we won't need any more affirmative action policies. I went to a very good university in my state at that time. At a time when there is no affirmative actions, but I was brilliant there because why? Because I had a very good primary education. The public education, the public schools were very good at that time. So the question for me, what kind of reparations that Angel raised, for me, we need all, I'm raising the question of universal policies. They are really important for us. One that most of ours, universal policies is a very large umbrella, very large coverage. So all the people, Blacks, even white people will benefit from universal policies. And I say that even white middle class will also benefit by them. Because for instance, we know, I know, and all the people there know that white middle class professors, for instance, have to work in 3 schools. They work in one school during the morning, the other school in the afternoon, and the third schools in the evening. They burn out. It's really awful for them. What if we say, oh, universal policies will mean to have a full-time schools. You will be just in one schools, beautiful schools, garden schools, because we combine the question of aesthetic. We need policies which are simultaneously ethic and aesthetic. We need beauty, why not? To raise with a very good mental health. We need beauty, and we also need ethics. So, you said about who will be the beneficiaries. I'm strategizing arcabouço, how do you say arcabouço?
Sorry.
A framework. I'm strategizing a broad framework that will benefit all Brazilian society. Only the white elite, the white supremacist elite, the conservative, the Bolsonarian elite won't be benefited. at all, because they are the ones that push the society behind, that can't accept any improvement not only for Blacks, but for our whole society. They don't want anything good for us. This is the reason I say that the most of Brazilian society will be really benefited by the reparations movements. Maybe I think
You answer
yes, I answered.
Yes.
Everything. Okay. Reparations, give me and Camila and Angel questions. Okay.
Guys, again, thank you so much, Ms. Diva. Thanks for coming. We appreciate. We have another event on Thursday with Marcelo de Salete, who is a cartoon comic book artist. Where is that gonna take place?
It's in Peterson's gym and the flyers in the back if you want.
Yes, there is a flyer in the back. If you didn't sign attendance, search for your attendance over there as well. You guys are more than welcome to come to other events promoted by the Center for Brazilian Studies and by the Africana Studies Department. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for having coming. Oh, thank you. Bye.